Luis Diego Rodriguez Jenkins says, what is the secret of a good job interview? Okay. Now, this is advice both for people in general who are doing job interviews and for English language learners or people who are doing English interviews who don't speak English natively. One of the big mistakes that people make in a job interview is to memorize exactly what they're going to say if they ask you certain questions. So why is this a problem? For a couple reasons. It is a big issue and you should never do it. Number one, if you memorize an answer and you are basically reading in your head, which is what memorization is, you're reading in your mind, I can tell. It's obvious. It's easy to tell when someone is reciting from memory compared to speaking naturally. Do you think I'm recalling things from memory right now? A script? And no, I'm not. I barely know what I'm about to say next. It's a real struggle for me. So it's going to sound fake, and if you've said something like, I'm a great communicator, and let me tell you a couple of reasons why. First, you're a great communicator, but you're not communicating with me. You're reading a script that you wrote before that you're just telling me. You're not a great communicator. You're a memorizer person robot. Get out. I have actually, so one of the things that I do is I help to recruit and train teachers from around the world. I'm in charge of a team that recruits teachers, right? So I've interviewed many people, hundreds of people. And there's a question that we ask to decide this. The question we ask is, can you talk about a time when you've had to think on your feet and handle something unexpected? Now, we ask this question for a very specific reason. Number one, we want people to talk about the example, but actually it's a secret question. It's a trick question. We actually don't care that much about the example. What we care about is how they express themselves when they're talking about the example. Are they a good communicator? They're about to potentially become a teacher on our platform, right? If they can't express themselves well and tell a good story and explain something clearly, they have no chance. Sometimes people respond the next day with their example, perhaps in video form. And you can tell, I can tell, that it's been memorized, that they've worked on it and memorized it. Immediately, we don't even think about it for 2 more seconds. It doesn't matter what the content is. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. We just say, no, done, out, bye, refuse, rejected. Because the nature of being in a workplace, the nature of being someone who works with others and giving proposals, and especially being an English teacher, is to be able to express yourself in an unexpected situation, to not know what people are going to ask. For example, how do I give a good job interview? What's the secret to a good job interview, right? You have to be able to see that, not know it was going to be there, and then talk about it. And if you can't do that, I'm afraid it's going to be hard to be a teacher in general. It's a skill that you develop. Okay, so that's just one example. But it's very important for that very important reason that you can just tell. The other reason that it's important, that it's a mistake, rather, to avoid memorizing is that you memorize for 10 questions they might ask you, but if they ask you a question that's almost the same as what you prepared for, and then you answer with what you memorized, it might not quite fit. And then the interviewer is thinking, you didn't really answer my question exactly. Not only are you reading from a script in your head, but you're kind of off the point. Get out, right? So no one would say it like that, but that's the idea, right? So what do? Well, you don't do that. You instead prepare for questions in the right way. You say, for example, I think they might ask me about a time when I struggled. Very common question. I think they might ask me a time when I've achieved something. I think they might ask me a time when I've had to be a leader. I think they might ask me about a time when I've had to maybe deal with something in a limited time frame. I think they might ask me how I would handle a situation related to my industry. All right, so you write down what you think they might ask you. And then you can make little outlines or think of examples. If you don't write it down, it's okay. At least think of the kind of thing you're going to say. If they ask me about this kind of thing, previous work experience working with a difficult person, I'm going to talk about that time I worked with Deborah. Deborah was tough to work with. Oh, Deborah. She was my colleague, and we were hired actually in the same week. And okay, but I'm going to answer it in a way that shows a good characteristic of myself. Maybe, for example, I really struggled with Deborah for a couple weeks, and then I figured out how to interact with Deborah on her terms. After I read a book, I read a really good book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it made me realize, you know what? I'm always arguing with Deborah. Do I have to argue with Deborah? Maybe I can figure out how to interact with Deborah on her terms. Maybe I can figure out her interaction style. Now, Deborah's a fictional person, but I'm answering the question how I might. And then I'll give a specific example of something that I did to better interact with Deborah that improved our relationship. And then I'll talk about later. And then after that, Deborah and I did ... together, and we won a prize for whatever it is. You want to turn a negative into a positive to show your good characteristics and your skills. But you don't plan out the whole answer. The words that you say are not that important. The content is important. And being able to express yourself clearly is important. But don't map out and plan out every single word. You get the idea. I'm going to talk about Deborah if they ask me about difficult people. That's all you need. I will talk about Deborah. If they ask me about this, I'll talk about that. Now, if you want to, you can write down simple outlines, little outlines, very simple outlines for yourself. But I don't think it's necessary. You don't have to do that. And prepare for 40, 50 questions in your head. Don't memorize. Go into the interview. You will feel confident. If they ask me this, I'm going to talk about it. Your English is not perfect. It's okay. Perfect English is not the most important thing for most employers. If you're in the room, they know you're not a native English speaker. It's okay. It's okay, right? It's all about your ability to express yourself and communicate. So hopefully that answers your question, Luis, or Louis. It's something that I really care about. I do have a course on this. If you're interested in really working on this and preparing, in the links in the description, you will click on that and see one of the courses is called Mastering Job Interview English. It is a 3-hour course. It includes, I believe it's 7 or 10 PDFs, plus many lessons, over 50 job interview questions that you may face, lessons about how to build your resume, how to prepare for the interview. All of this stuff is covered. It's a pretty in-depth, hopefully clear course about job interview English and handling a job interview in English. So if that's something you're interested in, check out that course. Again, don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for the question. It's a good one.